What exactly is the Python strategy, and how can we use it to win our chess games? Hey everyone, it's GM Max here, and this game I'm going to share with you was one I played against a 2-250-ish FIDE rated player in Blitz. I played my pet Scandinavian defense, but going for Queen d8 rather than my usual Queen a5 or the Shimanov variational Queen at e5, which I covered in the Zero Fury Scandinavian video of mine. But I played Queen d8, decided that against much lower-rated player I would just play something non-theoretical and just get a position to play. Now, after h3, if you play bishop h5, g4, and knight e5 is giving white way too strong of an attack here, so you do have to part with the bishop pair. But you sort of make the argument that, if you're able to put your pawns like this, that it somewhat compensates for the absence of the light squared bishop. In fact, in this position, a move g4 is considered a very strong gambit, but my opponent did not notice and played the normal move of bishop to e6. And if you are enjoying this video so far, do make sure to leave a like and also do consider subscribing. We're actually pretty close to the stage where I'll be able to monetize the channel, so yeah, it's going to be fun when that happens. Anyway, the move my opponent played here is the very natural move of long castles, which I think might actually be almost the most common move if you take all the amateur games. But we'll see that the move bishop b4 does allow black to get some reasonable counterplay based on doubling up the pawns, like bishop c3 and weakening their king, as it were. This may be the reason why white should either play a move like bishop d3 and only then castle long to avoid the problems we see in the game, or even to consider a move like a3, just preventing bishop b4 altogether. But after castles bishop b4, yeah, white has a little bit of a awkward decision to make. A move like bishop d2 is, well, the pawn on d4 is hanging for one thing, but also, rook d3 kind of blocks in where the bishop wants to develop. So you can see a lot of white's defense are not the most harmonious, and white in the game decided to play knight to e4. And after takes, what do you think is the move that I played here as black in order to establish a playable position? And when I do ask you a question like this, you can take this opportunity to pause the video to have a bit more time to think about it and figure out what you would play. Or you can just go ahead and you can see how the game played out. But in any case, if white's able to just use their bishop pair and play like c4, king b1 and go for the pawn storm, white's just going to be much, much better. So we do need to do something here. And with the move of queen d5, we are hitting the pawn on a2 as well as the queen, which more or less obliges white to trade. And now we get this endgame where white is a little bit better with the bishop pair. But the first step of Python strategy is basically making sure that all our pieces are on decent squares and that we don't have any pawn weaknesses, which is something that we have managed here. Now, at this point, I was expecting my opponent to play a move such as c4, just trying to play very dynamically and use his lead in development, open things up for the pair of bishops. Now, admittedly, black's position is not losing by any means. I mean, a position like this should still, of course, be quite decent for black in a sense. But of course, white is going to have the bishop pair advantage and the extra space and a bit of development. So it makes sense that white has some sort of pressure after, say, king b1 and, knight b6 and go d5. And, yeah, it just makes black's life a little bit difficult as such. But if white doesn't find this opportunity to change the position, and it has to be said that most players in over-the-board play and on lead chess are not really finding the best move here for white. The move c3 looks natural, but it does allow me to bring my bishop back to a decent square. And what we kind of see as the game plays out is that already by this stage, after just a couple of natural moves by opponent, like white's not really got an actual advantage anymore. Yeah, he has the bishop pair, but it's quite hard for him to find an effective pawn break. Whereas we have a very clear plan going b5, b4, and just creating a weakness with this very standard minority attack for the Carlsbad structure. Let's say if you do play something like the exchange Queen's Gambit Declined, or maybe the exchange Caro-Kann, for example, then yeah, you're going to notice a lot of these similar ideas kind of coming up. You can play them sometimes with colors reversed and so forth. But yeah, my opponent played the move a4, and I just played a natural move a6, just renewing the idea of b5. And yeah, what you can sort of see here is that, all of my pieces are on pretty good squares. Maybe my rook on h8 is a bit stuck, but can very easily come to c8 to support the queenside play, set up a pin against the king. So my opponent, feeling a little bit uncomfortable, decided to try and change the position where, if you play a move like b4, this is what the computer wants to play, trying to sort of clamp down on the queen side. But even then, black still has a pretty solid position without any weaknesses, and I mean, at the very least, you're not going to lose such a position, realistically speaking, as black, because we're just too solid here. But my opponent played the move f4, and it's sort of an example of a middle game move where he's still thinking in terms of, trying to attack and trying to open things up on the king side. But A, my king is on d7, and B, also the queens are off, so he doesn't really have a mating attack. And this again is applying the Python strategy where we ask ourselves, what is it that our opponent wants to do in this position? And once we figure out what their main idea is, we then ask, well, do we have a way just to stop it or just to render it very ineffective? So well done if you found the Soviet principle of fixing the opponent's weaknesses in place. I did this with the move of f5, fixing the f4 pawn as a target. And while we're not exactly winning this pawn by force, you might notice in this position that, white's light squared bishop is not able to defend the pawn, meaning that we can somewhat tie white up to the defense. Now, I will admit e5 was my one mistake of the game, where I should have just played g takes f5, where I didn't realize I can still bring the knight around this way to attack the pawn and have a pleasant advantage. And B, I had sort of underestimated the fact that my isolated d5 pawn could actually come under fire. Like if he plays bishop e2, this is actually going to be kind of awkward, where you can see we're not really getting in our knight e6 in time because of the attack on the d5 pawn. Fortunately for me, my opponent played a little bit passively with bishop c1, which might just be a little bit too prophylactic. I played my plan of knight d8, which, again, it's true, maybe I could still have gone after the d5 pawn. This is kind of what I was expecting him to do at some point, but instead he played rook f1, and yeah, it just allowed me to just sort of tie him up to this pressure where, if he does bring the bishop this way, well, then the pawn f4 will come under fire. So after rook d1, I played the move of b5. We had takes, and, the plan here is basically to go b4 and just create more weaknesses in white's structure. Again, we can see how ineffective the bishop pair are in such a fixed pawn structure as this one. Of course, yeah, bishop d2, not really ideal. We probably want to go bishop e3 and, go for this kind of defensive setup instead. I was also thinking he might try something like h4, h5 and just try to, simplify the position a bit and try to hold a draw that way. Because if you can trade more pawns, that will improve the drawing chances for white. But I mean, with the imbalance of the bishop versus knight, there's always going to be chances for black to convert it. And yeah, after rook h7, I'm threatening a little trick with knight d4 to win the pawn. So my opponent went back with king to d1. I played b4 just to create weaknesses. And yeah, again, white's best bet might just be to go h4 and just try to exchange off some of the isolated pawns, because after king e2, it looks very natural, but the problem is after take, I played a move rook b2, just setting up a threat on f4 using the pin. You could argue that maybe rook e8 first might have been more precise, saving this in reserve, but okay, rook b2 still worked out in the game where, opponent did not see the defense of rook b1 to try and trade off the rooks and stay in the game like that. Instead, he played a blunder of king to e3, which pretty much everything wins for black here, but yeah, basically I just played knight f4, leveraging the fact that if he does take the knight, I can just take and, be up in exchange, and everything falls apart for white here. In the game after bishop c4, yeah, knight g2, and he just resigned because, yeah, I'm just going to be able to either take the rook or, even play like knight h4 and, just basically checkmate him. In this case, well, I was probably going to play rook e8 if this came up in the game. Though the computer points out that f4 is technically a forced mate if you analyze it deep enough. But anyway, you can sort of see from this how the Python strategy works. Step 1, build that solid position with no weaknesses, like with this structure and later this one. And then the third one of just, preparing a logical plan to improve our position, while at the same time frustrating the opponent's attempts to create play themselves. And then finally, the step 3 of basically using the opponent's weaknesses against them. Make sure, that we just keep that good flow and control, and just let the opponent kind of make a big mistake that we can then exploit, rather than trying to punish, let's say, all the little mistakes they might go for. We wait for them to make a big one, and then we basically cash in. If you did enjoy this training and, this concept of the Python strategy really made an impression on you, do let me know in the comments below. I found that this is a strategy that's really helped me a lot in like basically performing at above a free 100 bullet level on lead chess. And I do find that the strategy, as you can see here, was just as effective in a blitz game, and is just effective in slower time controls, as is approach that most of the old Soviet grandmasters were employing back in the day, and even still to this day. And yeah, I think this also gives a pretty good taste of kind of what the content to expect, where just because I'm kind of working on some other things, I'm probably going to do a little bit less of the longer video content and present more as like bite-sized, like 10-minute or so training videos, just covering a clear topic and really helping you to, apply it in your games as succinctly as possible. So yeah, good luck with applying the Python strategy in your own games, and I will see you in the next training. Until then, take care.